Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. So, a viewer submitted this question to me recently. I've been thinking about going to teaching, but I don't think I can do it for 5 years, let alone 20 or 30 years. How did you do it for so long? And to answer that question, I'll need to provide some context. When I started my path into the classroom, it was right out of high school in 2010. I immediately became a walk on instructor, started substitute teaching, and then began my student teaching within just a few years because I actually finished my college degree early. I was teaching full time by 2016 and already had several years under my belt by that point, too. And when I started, it was right when teaching began to change. Following the Great Recession in '08 and the introduction of the No Child Left Behind Act before that, the landscape of education really began shifting around that time, and I lived right through that change. So I survived a little longer than most people do now. But basically, it was a different time. One where I could still form meaningful connections with kids, teach content in roughly the way I wanted to, and be the supportive teacher I went into the profession to be. It's why people could be teachers for their entire careers, despite the lack of personal and professional growth. I also entered the profession right at the very start of technology taking over the classroom, too. I was the last generation really raised on the old paper and pencil. Sure, I remember having computers in elementary and middle school, but they were in computer labs across campus we only went to on occasion for certain assignments or activities. Most of what I did growing up was learn in a very hands on and traditional way. That's not to argue that paper and pencil was entirely better per se, though, but rather to show that I witnessed the transfer over to full technology in real time and saw what it did to education and to teachers in particular. Believe it or not, my old high school and where I was a walk-on instructor for the first 2 years after I graduated was the very first school in Southern California to go one-to-one with students and tablets. Every single student got one, I believe, in 2012, which is ironically the same time I'd pinpoint the change really began and when education started failing. It wasn't inherently because of technology, but rather how it changed the way we perceive students, teachers, the role of parents, and schoolwork itself. And I guess what I mean by that is teaching was a job with a lot of work and management, sure, but also a fair amount of autonomy and trust in us to do our jobs. We were, for the most part, seen as professionals who helped kids grow, gave them foundational content knowledge, and prepared them for the future, whether that be their college or career. But by 2016, 2017, when overstandardization took over and technology was used as a crutch instead of a tool, that wasn't the landscape we had anymore. And it's also why I don't believe those stereotypically longer careers with veteran educators staying until they're 65 are going to happen as often in the years to come, especially following the pandemic and the years of distance learning where technology began to be relied on more and more by parents who raised their kids without any of the traditional skills millennials and previous generations were. And without the teaching of those traditional skills, educators had to take on more and more work without any comparable change in pay. To put it mildly, teaching, which already was multiple jobs in one, became unwieldy, and educators just haven't been able to keep up with it. It's exactly why kids can't read anymore and why we're graduating students who are functionally illiterate now. Parents aren't teaching their kids to read at home anymore, much less how to write, and that's impacting teachers, especially at the high school level, who simply aren't equipped or trained on how to teach kids to read. Check out my video on that one. Teachers also have to attempt to educate kids about digital literacy now because most teachers have to manage a Google Classroom, laptops, cell phones, and AI abuse in assignments too, since kids just copy and paste that or plagiarize assignments instead of doing them these days. They've been raised thinking that's appropriate behavior because their parents didn't reinforce healthy technology habits at home. Which leads me into the point that the scope of being a teacher has grown far beyond what the job description was ever intended to be. Teachers have been forced into becoming professional babysitters rather than the educated content and development experts they are, just to try and provide a satisfactory education for kids who are years behind grade level. Less than a third of graduating seniors now are anywhere remotely near grade level, just to put that in perspective. And on top of all of this, there's no trust in teachers because of that, even though none of those grade level problems are or have ever been our fault. When I started teaching, though, there was just a different mood about it, a different vibe, if you will. I got to know students, have genuinely deep and insightful discussions with them, and there was a mutual respect. But then everything changed. Society stopped caring as much, and administrators no longer held students accountable because they want funding from having butts in seats rather than suspending or even expelling kids who have no social or emotional control anymore. Violence is on the rise in classrooms. Teachers are drowning in grading and meaningless paperwork or meetings. Standardized tests and objectives have become more important than the relationships we fostered, and both parents and students stopped coming to conferences or events, so there's no longer that partnership between school and the home like we used to have. I've mentioned before how I feel that teaching is essentially a dead end job now, and I wanted to echo that here again by saying it's because all these problems building on top of one another for years on end, to the point that people aren't staying long term, and the profession will no longer be seen as the lifelong career that it used to be. We're already dealing with the old guidepost of 5 years to see if someone stays a teacher become no more than 2 years. Many are burning out in their student teaching before ever obtaining their credentials in the first place, and that's why so many vacancies continue to exist every year, and why we've been slashing teacher qualifications across the board to at least try and coach more to choose education as a career again. But I don't see that happening because the profession isn't what it was when I started. And if I chose to go into teaching now in 2026, I would not have lasted even half as long as I did when I left in 2022. It's why I've said if you're considering teaching right now, you really need to prepare for it to not be a forever career. Because that ship sailed a long time ago, and educators have finally woken up to just how bad things are, and how much society has no interest in changing things. Like I said, times have changed. Well, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and ring the bell to get notified whenever I release new content. The algorithm needs every like it can get, so thank you for doing that. Until next time, though, I've been Kevin, and I will see you in the next video.